My armor burned against my skin, the stench of charred metal and alien flesh turning my stomach. I'd never known such pain. It seeped into the shattered fragments of my soul like acid rain. Each ragged breath felt stolen from some cosmic debt I'd never be able to repay. The battlefield, once a landscape of calculated tactics, was now a grotesque canvas. Twisted corpses of my people littered the blasted ground, their emerald eyes glazed over, forever staring at a sky that promised no salvation. They'd followed me to the ends of the galaxy, believing my promises of victory against the humans. But I only led them to a massacre. It was folly to think we could defeat them. We knew almost nothing about their biology, their weapons, or even the true depths of their resolve. Hubris, born of 1,000 victories across star systems, had tricked me into thinking my legions were invincible. We should have retreated, regrouped. Now it was too late. My warriors, the best our civilization had to offer, were gone. Each loss an ember burning through the icy resolve I spent a lifetime perfecting. The calms crackled, a single human voice cutting through the chaos. A female one, smooth and steady, unlike anything I'd heard from their kind before. General Kale of the Varuchi Empire, we offer a final chance to surrender. There is no honor in a senseless fight to the last. Honor? My mandibles clicked in a bitter mockery of laughter. Honor was a dead concept on this blood-soaked wasteland. Had honor kept the fusion blasts from turning my soldiers to ash? Did honor bandage a shattered limb or turn back the tide of battle? No, honor was a luxury, one we could no longer afford. Tell your leaders they've won. My voice rasped, thick with failure. Kale surrenders. Shame was a tangible weight, colder than the desolate wind whipping across my broken form. It promised a future where I would relive this moment 1,000 times, where the ghosts of my soldiers would haunt every dream. Yet, a strange sliver of something else emerged, not hope, but a pragmatic sort of relief. I clung to it as if it were the only life raft in a sea of despair. Silence stretched across the battlefield. I strained to hear the cheers of human warriors, the clatter of them advancing to claim their prize. Yet, there was only an unsettling quiet. Then, movement at the edge of my vision, a lone human figure emerged from the smoke. Even in my weakened state, I felt a jolt of primal fear. They were legends half-whispered among my kind, relentless, adaptable, cunning beyond measure. Humans. Yet, this one moved not with the eager stride of a conqueror, but with a strange hesitancy. She, for the build and voice confirmed it, stopped several yards from my slumped form, weapon held low but not forgotten. Her eyes, visible behind the transparent visor of her helmet, flickered over me. There was no triumph in them, no gloating, just a calculating coldness that chilled me far more than any battlefield wound. General Kale? Her voice came again through the calms, more cautious now, a hint of unease coloring it. I managed a single nod, the motion sending spikes of fire through my damaged carapace. Our medics wish to render aid. This, she gestured at the devastation surrounding us, it doesn't have to continue. Aid? From an enemy who, moments ago, had my warriors in their crosshairs. The concept was so alien, so counter to everything I'd been taught about humans, that for a moment I couldn't fathom a response. Why? The word escaped my throat before I could censor it. Because unnecessary suffering. It's pointless. She lowered her weapon slightly. We're soldiers, not butchers. Her answer, so simple and pragmatic, sent a fresh wave of exhaustion through me. Was this a trick? Some ploy to glean information before my inevitable execution? My people would have used such tactics, I would have. Yet, a desperate, foolish part whispered that perhaps she was sincere. I closed my eyes, then opened them again. Help me. My voice cracked in defeat. Her reaction was immediate. She barked orders into a comm unit on her wrist, and within moments, 2 armored figures appeared, not charging in with weapons raised, but moving with practiced caution. Humans, both of them, clad in strange, flexible battle suits that seemed to mold around their bodies like a second skin. Between them, they carried a hovering stretcher that whined with an energy I didn't recognize. As they approached, I couldn't hold back a shiver of fear. Even helpless, I was an alien, the enemy, the monster from their nightmares. These 2 brave, or foolish, humans were entrusting their lives to a creature they were taught to hate. The stretcher lowered beside me. The medics were gentle yet firm, their movements surprisingly delicate given their size. Their touch, I realized with a jolt, was meant to soothe, not inflict more pain. One, a man with deeply tanned skin and steady brown eyes, held up a small device that emitted a soft, blue light. As he ran it over my mangled body, the worst of the burning subsided, replaced by a strange numbness. Stabilizing your vitals, General, he murmured, his voice carefully neutral, free of judgment or revulsion. We'll have you patched up as best we can. I watched his hands work, my alien biology an open book for him to dissect. It was both unsettling and oddly comforting. It occurred to me then that I knew nothing about humans at the individual level. Stories of their aggression, their insatiable hunger for conquest had been painted with broad strokes. Yet, these individuals showed a compassion that defied every lesson my superiors had ever drilled into me. They lifted my ruined form onto the stretcher, the motion jarring despite the dampening field. As they prepared to transport me back to their lines, a wave of bleak humor washed over me. I was Kale, General of the Varuchi Empire, scourge of a dozen star systems, now reduced to helpless cargo in the hands of his enemies. The human with the kind eyes seemed to sense my spiraling thoughts. Hang in there, General, he offered, and his smile held a surprising warmth. War's over for you. For now, our only job is to keep you alive. My own world was lost, my command in shambles. I was a prisoner with no bargaining chips except a broken body. But the words of this enemy medic, words offered with such genuine compassion, ignited a flicker of something I couldn't yet name inside me. Perhaps it wasn't hope. Hope was for those who believed in better tomorrows. But it was something. A possibility, strange and alien as the humans themselves, that survival might not be the worst fate the universe had in store. Their field hospital was chaos, controlled, urgent, but undeniable chaos. I was shuttled through stark white corridors, the whir of unfamiliar machines and the sharp tang of antiseptic hanging heavy in the air. Humans of all sizes and colors buzzed around me, their faces a blur of focused intensity. Pain throbbed through my body, a constant drumbeat reminding me of how close I'd come to the brink. It was a pain lessened, made bearable by their strange medical devices, but ever-present nonetheless. I caught glimpses of myself reflected in the shiny surfaces, a broken, monstrous thing, my once vibrant green carapace mottled and charred, splintered in places. Then, there was a shift. I was wheeled into a smaller, quieter room. A lone human waited for me. She was older than the others, her hair silvered with age, and creases etched lines of experience around her eyes. Unlike the others, she wore no bulky armor, only a simple uniform adorned with symbols I didn't recognize. General Kale, I am Dr. Sarah Lynn, she stated, her voice clipped and precise. I'll be overseeing your treatment. She moved towards me, no hesitation or fear in those movements. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink, an alien predator and its wounded prey facing one another across an invisible gulf. It would have been so easy to lash out, to try and take her hostage, the only bargaining chip left to me. But even in my weakened state, some deep instinctual knowledge told me that would achieve nothing but a swift and merciless end for myself. You speak my language, I rasped, surprised. We've studied your kind, she said with disarming honesty. Communication paves the way to understanding. Even in war, that's important. Perhaps she sensed my confusion, the conflict raging within me. You're safe here, General, she continued, softer this time. We treat our wounded, even if they were our enemies a few hours before. That strange concept again, mercy extended to the undeserving. It echoed the actions of her medics on the battlefield, a jarring contradiction to the tales I'd heard, of ruthless human warriors who took no prisoners, who reveled in destruction. Dr. Lynn's examination was thorough, clinical in its efficiency. Each touch was measured, purposeful. Despite my status as prisoner and patient under her care, I felt a strange sliver of respect for her, even if I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. You've sustained extensive injuries, General. Damaged exoskeleton, multiple fractures, severe internal trauma, she listed clinically as she worked. It's remarkable you're even conscious. My species is resilient. The statement was one of pride, now laced with the bitterness of defeat. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. So is ours, it seems. Perhaps it's a quality of all apex predators. Her words hung in the air. Apex predators. We were, to them, nothing more than dangerous beasts locked in a struggle for dominance. Surgery is imperative, she continued. Your physiology is complex, and there are complications. I won't lie to you, the odds are not in your favor. She met my gaze then, something like compassion flickered in her eyes. But I have repaired stranger things. With far less cooperative patience. She left me then, alone with my traitorous thoughts. As they brought the anesthetic, the sweet oblivion promising temporary escape from pain and turmoil, a question lingered in my mind, a question as alien to me as the humans themselves. Did I want to survive? I woke to a different sort of agony. My body was a burning altar, every nerve ending singing in protest. Even the advanced painkillers the humans provided could only blunt the edge of that suffering. Days, maybe weeks, melted into a haze of pain and fitful dozing. Somewhere on the periphery of my existence, there were human voices, Dr. Lin's crisp efficiency, the gentle murmur of nurses checking my vitals, the occasional gruffer tones of the armed guards posted outside my door. And there were dreams. Not restful ones, but jagged nightmares born of a fractured spirit. Phantom screams of my soldiers echoed in the darkness, their faces twisted in accusing agony. Battles lost, comrades fallen, my choices laid bare for judgment in the stark light of bitter retrospection. Waking from those horrors often felt worse than the endless ache. The bleakness inside me deepened, the guilt, a poisonous weight dragging me towards an abyss where oblivion seemed the only mercy. Yet, they stubbornly kept me alive. The humans fed me, cleaned me, and repaired my broken body with a skill that bordered on the miraculous. Even as their machines stitched me back together, my sense of self was unraveling at the seams. One night, or was it day? Time lost all meaning within those sterile walls. I awoke in a cold sweat, the scream dying in my throat. A human face loomed into view in the dimness. A nurse, young, barely an adult by human standards, with wide worried eyes. "Bad dream?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I stared at her, a brittle laugh forming deep in my chest. What could this child possibly understand of the horrors I'd lived through, the burden I carried? But her eyes, so filled with earnest concern, gave me pause. "Nightmares," I corrected in a ragged whisper. "Every night." She bit her lip and, with a hesitant grace I was too weak to question, sat beside me on the edge of my bed. Her hand found mine, her touch surprisingly warm against my chilled skin. We sat there in silence, a wounded alien general and a frightened human girl, an ocean of differences between us. And yet, in that simple act of shared vigil, something vital started to shift within me. A stark recognition that suffering wasn't a language exclusive to my kind. Over the following days, I noticed changes. The guards outside my door eyed me with less open hostility, their stances tense but no longer overtly aggressive. Dr. Lin visited me daily, her clinical demeanor softening ever so slightly. She started asking questions, not about the war or my empire, but about me, my life before the conflict, my family, my hopes. Words I hadn't uttered in years stumbled from my lips, clumsy and halting at first. I learned about her, too. Dr. Lin, a surgeon on a world light years away, whose son was a pilot fighting somewhere across the vastness of space. We became reluctant pen pals of sorts, our words exchanged in the slow, tedious process of translation software. We spoke of trivial things, music, history, the longing for a home we might never see again. Their world wasn't so different from my own. We were both species who planted seeds, built structures, and looked towards the stars with a mixture of fear and wonder. War had made enemies of us, thrust us into horrific conflict, but the fundamental building blocks of our existence were startlingly similar. One evening, as the metallic tang of medication dulled my senses, I made a decision. I asked Dr. Lin to teach me more about her people, their language, their customs. She looked startled, then wary, but eventually, a small, determined smile pulled at her lips. And so, the alien general became her most dedicated and unlikely student. My recovery was as miraculous as the human's ability to heal me. Weeks turned into months, and the searing pain slowly subsided into a dull ache. With physiotherapy, I regained the use of my limbs, the shattered fragments of my carapace mended with a strange alloy that both mirrored and strengthened my natural armor. Still, I walked among them as an outsider, a prisoner, a curiosity, a lingering shadow of the threat they had faced. Yet, their world was opening up to me, one halting word and awkward gesture at a time. The humans, in their baffling mix of aggression and compassion, became less an abstract foe and more a complex tapestry of individuals. There was Private Hayes, a guard tasked with watching me, who traded his ration of sweets for extra language lessons because I struggled with the sharp edges of human profanity. There was Nurse Chen, whose gentle touch belied the fierce protectiveness she showed to her patients, human or otherwise. And always, there was Dr. Lin, whose relentless questions chipped away at the walls I'd built around myself, forcing me to confront not just my failings, but the lies upon which my empire was built. Rumors traveled fast in their enclosed metal hive of a base. Word of the alien general learning their tongue, poring over their history texts, reached ears far above my humble hospital room. A delegation arrived, politicians and diplomats, not warriors. At first, I saw them with the mistrust of a hunted animal. But there were no weapons in their hands, only outstretched palms and tentative smiles. After a tense meeting filled with translated niceties and posturing, one of them asked the question that shifted the very ground beneath my feet. "General Kale, why did your people attack us?" My answer was a confession, a litany of hubris, expansionist hunger veiled in the pretense of self-defense. They listened, faces stony, as I laid bare the ugly truths I had spent a lifetime ignoring. Then came the second question, the one that threatened to shatter the fragile peace I had begun to crave. "Would you be willing to help us end this war?" The offer was so unexpected, so utterly absurd, that my immediate instinct was to reject it. I was a soldier, not a diplomat. I was the enemy, the monster who had led their sons and daughters into the slaughterhouse. Surely they sought vengeance, or at best, wished to parade me in chains as a symbol of their triumph. Yet, somewhere in the weary depths of my soul, a flicker of something new stirred. Not hope, precisely, but a sense of bleak opportunity. A chance, however slim, to atone in some small way for the countless lives ruined on my command. To turn my knowledge of my own people, their tactics and their weaknesses, into something positive for the very species I had sought to destroy. My surrender had been one of necessity. This was a chance at something even harder, redemption. "I cannot speak for my species," I told them carefully. "I am no longer their leader. But if you are truly open to an armistice, I have information that could help in negotiations." Their surprise was evident. I saw it in their widened eyes, the sudden shift in the atmosphere of the room. It seemed they had expected defiance, or resignation, not this tentative offer of cooperation. One of them, a woman with a stern face and a voice like cut steel, leaned forward. "And what makes you think we should trust a word you say?" My mandibles clicked in a mirthless parody of a smile. "You have no reason to, save for the fact that I, of all people, now understand the terrible cost of continuing this war." And so began a strange new chapter in my existence. I became their advisor, an alien strategist forced to turn my knowledge against my own kind. It was a path fraught with moral peril, a tightrope walk over an abyss of guilt. There were whispers and dark looks from the humans, a constant undercurrent of distrust. Yet, with each intelligence report I dissected, each battle plan I helped counter, the impossible started to feel within reach. It seemed the humans, for all their suspicion, understood a simple truth that my own people had always denied: even the bitterest enemy can become a vital, if unlikely, ally. And somewhere within me, the guilt that had threatened to consume me whole twisted into something else. A grim determination to repay, in whatever way I could, the debt my species owed. I did it not out of any sense of love or kinship with these strange, relentless creatures, but for the fallen soldiers on both sides. And the hope, so fragile it almost hurt, that perhaps from the ashes of this brutal war, something resembling understanding could rise. The armistice came not in a burst of grand pronouncements, but a series of grueling ceasefires, uneasy stand-downs, and tense diplomatic maneuverings. I was a pawn in their game at times, a grotesque trophy carted across star systems to sit as a silent observer at negotiation tables, my scarred form a constant reminder of the brutality both sides had endured. My own people saw me as a traitor, the broadcasts from my former empire vilifying me in terms that sent shivers down my spine. Yet, even as my heart hammered in fear at those threats, a stronger, colder resolve hardened within me. It was Dr. Lin, of all people, who helped me process this strange duality, fear coexisting with purpose. "War changes us all, General," she said one day, exhaustion etching lines deeper into her face. "Sometimes, it's the terrible things that make us capable of good." Her bluntness was a balm on a festering wound. It gave me the courage to face my reflections, monstrous and alien as they were, and to admit the truth: a part of me still reveled in strategy, in the precise mental warfare, even if the enemy was now my former kin, and the stakes were peace, not conquest. The final push was ugly. My former commanders weren't idealists driven by righteous fury, but desperate, cornered animals. They unleashed a bioweapon, a last resort meant to scar the earth and cripple the humans for generations to come. I knew its potential, knew the horrors it would create, because my military scientists had been on the verge of developing something eerily similar. The day I decrypted the intercepted orders, ice flooded my veins. This was no mere battlefield, it was a strike aimed at extinguishing the very core of the human world. In that moment, surrounded by grim-faced strategists and advisors, any lingering connection I felt to my species was severed. It was a brutal realization, that I now sided more fully with these strange, compassionate, sometimes brutal humans than my own kind. Frantic consultations, desperate rerouting of defense grids, and the cold, sickening knowledge that even with every countermeasure the weapon would inflict monstrous damage. Those sleepless nights welded me to the humans in a way no treaty ever could. We fought for a common cause, not out of newfound unity, but because survival, both theirs and mine, demanded it. When the dust settled, the war was indeed over. The bioweapon had been partially neutralized, its horrifying effects contained but still monstrous. The cost in human life was staggering, something that haunted what remained of my conscience. My former empire, crippled and facing internal rebellions, begrudgingly accepted peace through a treaty they saw as a bitter defeat. For me, there was no triumph, no return to glory. The humans, to their credit and perhaps their own surprise, didn't execute me or lock me away as a war criminal. They offered a strange compromise: exile. A remote colony world, far from both Earth and my former home, a place where I could live out my days in relative peace, forever marked as both a monster and, in a strange, twisted way, a savior. It was, as Dr. Lin pointed out with dry amusement, a sort of retirement for troublesome generals, the only kind your species and ours seemed to create. The day I departed Earth was quiet. A handful of high-ranking officials saw me off, a gesture of wary respect that I didn't fully deserve. Dr. Lin was there too, the lines of age now a permanent fixture on her face. There were no grand speeches, no promises of future alliances. Just a simple handshake, her grip surprisingly strong, and a quiet admission that echoed my own turbulent thoughts. "We may have won," she said softly, "but God, at what cost? Maybe someday, our children, or theirs, they'll find a way to do better than we did." I had no comforting lies to offer, no promises of an enduring peace. My legacy was one of blood and betrayal, a lifetime of wrong turns that had brought me, almost accidentally, to this sliver of redemption. As the shuttle pierced the atmosphere, carrying me towards a lonely exile, I watched the blue marble of Earth shrink against the vastness of space. It had become something precious, a world defended, in part, by the knowledge and actions of its former enemy. It was a strange sort of victory, an uneasy peace built on the sacrifices of countless lives, and an uncertain future where a disgraced alien general might be the closest thing to a bridge between two species deeply scarred by conflict. Yet, as I drifted towards a new horizon, a flicker of that strange thing called hope sparked to life. It was a fragile, foolish ember amidst the ashes, but an ember nonetheless.